When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome to Insatiable Season 4, Episode 4, How to Be a Healthy Mom When There's No Time with Graeme Seabrook. So many of my clients overeat and overdrink because of the stress and demands of motherhood. Given that our season's theme is clarifying the issue so that we can move forward in a powerful new way, I wanted to bring Graeme on so that we could clarify that motherhood is separate from loving your kids. And when we start to realize that motherhood, we can define it in a new, healthier way, this starts to open up new possibilities for healing and eating well. I wanted Graeme to give us some ideas to find a win-win for kids and our moms. In today's episode, we get into how you can love your kids and hate how motherhood is defined today, and how you can start to reclaim motherhood on your own terms. How capitalism sets up perfectionism in this judgy tone of motherhood of both ourselves as moms and other moms. And the importance of shifting the focus away from your children's happiness to this for both you and them. Here's a little bit more about Graeme. She is a motherhood life coach whose approach to coaching is based on the belief that you must be a priority in your own life in order to thrive. Following a traumatizing birth experience and postpartum depression, anxiety, and PTSD, Graeme began a healing journey as a mother and a woman. She is dedicated to helping mothers reclaim their humanity. She writes, and this is one of my favorite lines in her writing, that we treat mothers as if they are inhuman, and yet we expect them to be superhuman. You can check out more about Graeme at theproblemwithmotherhood.com. And also another plug, if you really like the Insatiable listener and have found value in it, I would really appreciate an iTunes review. My goal is to get to 100 by the end of summer. And it's not just an arbitrary number, kind of like an arbitrary number on the scale. But once you get over 100 reviews, it's considered a top tier podcast so more people can find us. And so we're really close. We just need a couple more, and I'd really appreciate if you guys could help me out there. All right, on to today's episode. Get your paper and pen, or just get ready to listen to this a couple times because there was a lot of good information. Thank you so much for being here today, Graeme. I am so excited. Your perspective is exactly what our Insatiable listeners need. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So first of all, one of our listeners, Stephanie Truax, thank you, Stephanie, sent me to you. She's like, you have to have this woman on. She helped my friend. So I always know we're going to get good stuff when our listeners recommend people. But, I'm not a mother myself, but that doesn't mean that's not why I'm not going to not have people who talk about motherhood on. But in my practice, a lot of my clients come to realize that either they're emotional eating, they're stress eating, or what I'm starting to see with moms is they're not healing from Hashimoto's, depression, adrenal fatigue, all this stuff.
Right.
It basically requires your body to be in a rest and relaxation.
Oh, that's cute.
Rather than fight or flight. And one of the things that we talk about is the separation of motherhood as a social construct versus loving your children.
Oh my God, yes.
And even just being able to see that there's a difference. And then, which is basically a lot of your work is about reclaiming personhood in motherhood. So can you talk a little bit about those definitions? And I just kind of vomited a lot, but you can take it from there.
No, that's huge. Okay. Because there are so many things, the illnesses that you mentioned and so many more that really do require you, if you are going to fully heal, to have time and rest and quiet and all of these things that are kind of diametrically opposed to motherhood, the way that we do it right now, the way that we do it in the US in 2018 and have for, 20, 30 years. It's been getting worse and worse and worse. And this is where I get super political and people start to roll their eyes and or yell at me.
Not on this show. We're all about taking down the power structures.
But that's really what it is. Okay. So that's really what it is. It is capitalism that tells us that we should be producing constantly. And sets up this model of perfectionism, right? That there is this perfect mother. This perfect mother is doing all of these things. And really, if you ask any mom who the perfect mother is, the perfect mother is usually 10 to 15 moms that she has squished together in her head. It's like the Pinterest mom and the perfect working mom and the stay-at-home mom and the soccer mom and the horseback riding mom and the ballet mom and like all of these women that she has just squished into one person that she then thinks that she should be able to embody. Okay, that's ridiculous. Like that's not pop. Nobody can do that. Like you heard how ridiculous that sounded as I was saying it, right?
Right. But I think what you brought up, it's the design of perfectionism from capitalism and that there is a right and wrong way.
Oh, there is a right and wrong way. There's a right and wrong way. There's a right and wrong way. And what happens is that we so deeply want to get motherhood right. And we are all so terrified every moment of screwing it up because this really is life and death stuff, right? This is a whole life that you are in charge of. That's kind of a big deal. If you add perfectionism on top of life and death, how then do you rest? How then do you create space for healing? If you have perfectionism on top of life and death, there is not room for anything else. There's definitely not room for just basic humanity, which includes screwing up from time to time, you know?
Well, yeah. And it makes me think about, too, the idea of what is perfect, because you were talking about this is at least how we've done motherhood for the past 30 years. And I was in The Beauty Myth by Dr. Naomi Wolf. She talks about like every time women start to make progress, which we saw coming out of like the 70s, 80s, you get this backlash. Beauty standards get tighter and then motherhood almost gets piled on because I've always talked about this with Carlos because he's researching for his novel and how the role of the child has changed. Like before in the industrial era, it was about you had kids to work your farm. Like they were producing for you, right?
Yes.
And we look at even like in Downton Abbey, like the wealthy never took care of their kids. And then the Industrial Revolution happened, women started getting in the workforce. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how old you are, but when I grew up, I thought I had this really healthy mix where our schedule revolved around my parents because they both worked, but we were still taken care of on the weekends and driven places, but it was not. And now it seems like the past 30 years, it's all about the child. And nothing about the parents.
So here's the thing. I thought I had a really healthy mix until I became a mom. And I looked back and I went, wait a minute. That's some crap. So here, I said a while back that the feminism of our mothers left motherhood out of the picture. And everybody was like, but there was a lot of head tilting. And I was like, no, literally go back and look at the pictures. Go back and look at the actual pictures, Polaroid pictures of your growing up, who is in the picture. Because I think I'm 39, and I think it was a little bit like my sister, who's a little bit older than me, through maybe the millennials, where the focus changed. Our moms were working. A lot of our moms were working, or at least it was totally accepted if they wanted to work. If they were staying at home, it was probably because they wanted to. They were allowed to go to work. They were allowed to excel. Allowed, that's an annoying word. But they were encouraged to shatter glass ceilings and do all of these amazing things. And while they were doing all of those things, they also still had to keep track of dentist appointments and doctor's appointments and school lunches and permission slips. And my mom worked the exact same amount of hours as my dad worked, but my mom also was the one who did 90% of the cooking in our house, 90% of the cleaning in our house. And it wasn't that my dad didn't know how. My dad's a great cook. My dad was in the military. He can clean with like that white glove thing. Like he knows how to do all of these things, right? And I was raised in an environment where I was supposed to expect men to know how to do those things. He just very rarely did it.
Well, that's interesting because my family situation was different. My parents both taught and my dad did the cleaning. And it's interesting because in my relationship with Carlos, we both share on we both make money. We both have, we both clean, we both cook. It's very like what was modeled for me. So I guess I'm coming from a different perspective. My dad was the one driving us everywhere. So it was a very like different setup, I think, than
My dad, there was
People.
a year when my dad was working, he was like consulting. And so he wasn't working full time. It was right after we moved. And my mom was working a corporate job and she was working for IBM. And so she was able to just go straight to the different, to a different headquarters. It was fine. But my dad had to find a job. And in that time, he was the one that was like taking me to school and picking me up from school and home with me and doing homework. And, he was also, because the consulting stuff was like 2 days a week. And so that was the time, it was 5th grade. I loved it. It was awesome because we got really close and really connected over that year. But it was just kind of assumed that when he was working, that his work was somehow more important. And if you asked either of my parents, they would say that was not at all true, right? They would be like, no, are you kidding? We're feminists. We raised you to be, and they did. They raised me to expect much more. But what I was seeing in my household was uneven without either of them really realizing that it was uneven, And I think that's a lot of us saw that. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, no, to your point, if you look at the research, like most women are still doing, it's like, oh, you can have it all. But what really it meant is you can go to work and do it all.
Yes. But it really, like that wave of feminism did. And it was a lot. Like, I don't want to look at my mom and my grandmother and say, oh, you guys didn't do enough. No, they did a hell of a lot. Like,
yeah.
What? And I appreciate them for that.
And
more for us, right? I'm like, so how do I say this in a nice way where my mom isn't going to kill me? And there's still more for us to do because I want things to be different for my daughter and my son. And the life that I am creating with Adam is totally different. And I think part of that is just our personalities. Part of that are conscious choices that we made, right? And part of it is just honestly, actually before our son was born, I got really sick. Like, I had depression and anxiety during my pregnancy. I didn't know that that's what it was. Like, nobody told me that that's what it was. We thought it was hormones because everybody tells you hormones. When you're like, I said to people, like, I feel crazy. And they're like, yeah, those hormones are horrible. And I'm going, no, I think this is something else. But I fell into a really horrible black hole of depression pretty much the second that my son was born. I had a very traumatic birth. I had an emergency C-section. It was not a good time for anybody. And both Adam and I at different points thought that we were going to lose our son and that I was going to die as well. Like, it was terrifying. So instead of having those moments that you dream about after the birth of like holding your baby and nursing him or her or whatever, and having like that cuddly family picture time, none of that happened. He had some breathing issues, so I didn't even get to hold him for like 12 hours. And by the time I did, I was already like dissociating a little bit. And it was like I was watching myself act out this love that I was supposed to have and these feelings that I knew I was supposed to have. And I knew what it looked like because I watch Hallmark movies. I know what it's supposed to look like. Like, I can do this. And that's what I did. But Adam changed diapers. Adam had to help me with my wound care from the C-section. He had to like help me into the shower and out of the shower. He had to clean. I couldn't vacuum. I couldn't bend over. He had to mother me in the way that we define motherhood, when you think about it. He had to physically care for me. He had to emotionally care for me as I fell apart. And he had to care for our son at the same time. And that wasn't anybody's plan. That wasn't anybody's plan.
Well, and that makes me think about, we think of motherhood because the focus is only on the child and the woman and her personhood kind of gets erased. That motherhood really needs to start like as you're preparing, almost like not even once you get pregnant, but like preparing your body physically.
Yes.
So that you can start to recognize what is what, because I mean, one of the things that I've been reading about a lot is how Black women die in childbirth at astronomical rates. And there's this concept called weathering. And part of it is they're dismissed. There's racism. And part of the effects of racism is this weathering. And I think all women of all colors go through it, but I think it hits hardest of Black, Hispanic women.
Yes.
But weathering, for our listeners, and this isn't like the official definition, but it's basically like all of the stress that you're under, it basically weathers you. Mm-hmm. And so you're heading into pregnancy and motherhood not at like
already depleted.
Depleted. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that makes me think about, and it's a lot of your writing, which I love, is you talk about like we focus all this stuff on the baby,
right,
and like what you're gonna like what diapers and what, but there's
mm-hmm.
no focus on the woman. And can you talk to a little bit about that and why that happens?
Oh my goodness. People are going to, this is again with the capitalism. The babies are the product.
Oh my God, I just had an aha.
The
They're
babies
like
are
your
the product, and mothers are the workers. Fathers are the managers. Babies are the product. Who has ever cared about the workers? Ever in the history of ever.
Never.
Right. We deeply care about the product, but the number of mothers who have birth stories like mine who get told as they are shaking and sobbing, you have a healthy baby, so everything's fine. That face. Thank you. Thank you for growling. Thank you for I appreciate that but that is what we get told. That is what we tell ourselves. It's so ingrained that it's not just coming from the outside. It's coming from the mother saying, okay, but I have a healthy baby and that's all that matters. As if your experience of motherhood doesn't matter. And every time we say these things or hear these things that are so dehumanizing to us, you cannot help but soak that in. You cannot help but take that in. And it really does. It starts from the second that you announce that you're pregnant. I mean, the second. Every pregnant person who has ever had a pregnancy that I know of has a story. The stranger who touched their belly, of the coworker who told them this horrifying birth story without any concern for are you traumatizing this person that you're talking to? Of the advice that came in, of the really invasive questions. I mean, one of my friends, she's very pregnant right now, and she was in the grocery store the other day and somebody asked her about her cervix. And I was like,
what? Were you like, what are you doing in aisle 14? Is this for your cervix? Like, what the hell?
She was like, oh, she asked her, well, how far along are you? Which I think is, when you see a massively pregnant woman, you can say that. Okay, sure. And she was like, yeah, she said, well, we've only got 3 weeks left. And she's like, so is your cervix softening already? Excuse me?
Oh my God.
What are you talking about? Is my cervix? Why do you think that you have the right to this very intimate detail about my body and this process that I'm about to go through? Because we also have no way of knowing from looking at somebody what their medical history is. How many pregnancies has this person lost? How many children has this person had? How many traumas has this person gone through? How triggering is that question you just asked? You don't know, but you don't care because you don't see her as a human being. You see her as this pod that's carrying a baby. The questions are always about the baby. Well, how many pounds and what is the gender and is it moving a lot and is it kicking and it's never, how are you feeling? Are you scared? What do you need? How can I help you?
That's such a great point. As you're talking, I'm thinking about how our culture kind of grooms women. In patriarchy, you're groomed to feel that men are valued over women, so that women are inferior. But then, I think what's interesting is a lot of, and I'm speaking for the half of my clients who have children, the other half have chosen not to have them, or they're just not having them, is you're groomed for this. And then a lot of my clients get really into their careers, right? Mm-hmm. And then they feel like and they are confident in many areas, but then it's almost like this motherhood. And you talk about a grief when the loss. Yeah. And I want to talk about that because I think that's not spoken about enough, but you have this whole life. Mm-hmm. And you're confident in some ways and in some areas. And especially if you grew up like we did, I'm 39 as well, or a little bit older, or, most people listening to this most of this community here has a confidence in some areas, right? Mm-hmm. And those are good people or whatever. Yeah. But then, and you feel like, oh, I'm empowered, I'm equal. And then either you hit a threshold in your career. I had a good friend of mine who grew up relatively conservative and then hit a threshold in her career where she saw the sexism and the misogyny. And it's made her very much, it's been really interesting to see. But she saw that in her career. But some people, they hit the ceiling with motherhood. So can you talk about this? So then you're not really you're dehumanized during the pregnancy process, even though it doesn't feel like that. People think they're supporting you, but it's really about the child.
Oh yeah, it's totally all about the child. You're dehumanized during pregnancy. You're dehumanized during birth.
Yes. And then let's talk about this
Then
because I was
the
just out
baby
with,
comes, and you're
yeah.
supposed to be this glowing. First of all, you're supposed to get your body back. I don't really understand that because I have been in this body my whole life. I have never been in a different body. It has looked different. It's done different stuff, but it was always the same one. Like, I don't have a tag or anything to prove that.
I laugh, but it's dark humor.
Like, I don't know which body I was supposed to get back and where it went and how do I tell it to come back? Like, what? It confuses me. But you're supposed to somehow magically do that. You're also supposed to somehow magically like want to be the exact same type of sexual being that you were before. Nothing should have changed. So no wanting more sex or less sex or different sex or, no, go back. Exactly. It's like they want to put us in a time machine and move us back to the people we were before 40 weeks and, I don't know, somewhere between an hour and 3 days of labor, possibly a major surgery. But you're supposed to time warp all the way back to that and then also be a perfect mother. Well, how is that possible?
Well, if I think of your really profound metaphor of the mother is just the worker in a capitalistic society, and I think this is changing, but right now most people don't find meaning in what they're doing, right? Like they're disconnected. So it's like, you're not supposed to be connected to this process. It's not supposed to shape you. It's an assembly line. This is just how it's done. And so
the number of people who get asked when they're having number 2, like as they're leaving the hospital, will blow your mind. This is not, when you said assembly line, I was like, yep, there you go. And that's not what this is. And this whole idea of, 2 weeks to go back to work.
Oh my God. Especially when you haven't.
Your body physically cannot heal from child. I don't care if you had the easiest, simplest, most natural and amazing and ecstatic childbirth. Your organs have not moved back to where they originally were in 2 weeks. Like, they just haven't. So, talk about dehumanizing.
Well, again, if we talk about the depletion and the weathering that you're coming in with, I worked in Paris for a while, and I wrote this whole blog post many years ago. Like, you want to know why French women don't get fat? Because they have a year after giving birth, they have a social safety net. It is not that they have 2-hour lunches. I mean, that's a product of these social structures of not, but it's like, they get like someone comes to their home and helps them. And
if you look, and it's not just there, it's really everywhere around the world except for here. We really are an anomaly here. I have so many, I'm really lucky to have friends who are in first generation immigrant families. And so a lot of them are the first time anybody is giving birth in the US, right? And so their moms are like, this is so strange. Where are all of the people? They're confused. Where are all of the aunts and uncles and entire families that come and stay with you before and during and after? Who is stocking your freezer with all of the super protein rich things? Because in every culture, it's deeply protein rich something, right? It's always specific to that culture, but soups or stews or some type of casserole, something, but it's always like these really high protein foods that are just for the mother, that the mother is not preparing. The father is preparing it, or the grandmother, aunts, uncles. It's not even necessarily, a lot of times it's gendered, but it's not even necessarily gendered. It's just whoever in the family is best at making that thing puts it in your freezer. Mothers are brought the baby into the bed because there's a lot of, especially in Asian cultures, where mothers are not supposed to get out of bed for 40 days.
Wow. So they can replenish?
Yeah. And we're talking from the poorest farm family all the way up. So that in order for that to happen, you have to have a strong community. You have to have enough people around you that you can stay in bed for 40 days. And how many, I know that I did not. And I would bet the vast majority of people listening to this would be like, how the hell would I stay in bed for 40 days? It's not possible. How would the bills get paid? How would my other children be taken care of? How would my life continue to go? How would I not get fired? How would I, just like those basic realities. But women they're bound so that your body has, not so that you can get skinny again, but because your body needs the support. Your muscles are not healed. And so it's outside the binding is to give your muscles the support to heal as everything moves back the way it's supposed to move. There's really specific yoga poses and that postnatal women are supposed to do, and Tai Chi poses. And then there's something, I can't remember. There's like a South American one. So there's really specific exercises that you're supposed to do to help build back up those muscles so that you can, move back into your daily life. So there are all of these rituals that everyone else has except for us.
When I just keep thinking of the health angle of like, if you don't, because I'm thinking of a lot of my clients come to me when their kids, like they've had 2 kids and they're exhausted. Their kid is almost like 5 and it's, or like the youngest is 5 or whatever, but it's, and everyone's body's different, but it's like your body hits a point where because now you haven't healed and then you're expected to go out and hit the ground running, the cumulative effect. It's like, if this is you, it's amazing that you're all functioning. Like, that's what I always tell my clients. I'm like, when you really understand the support you need and what you're going without, isn't it kind of amazing the level that you're functioning?
It's miraculous, because especially the more that we understand how emotional stress impacts our physical health.
Oh my God.
And the amount of grief that we do not process as mothers.
Can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because I want to get to kind of like, as we're growing up, like what happens? Because people don't, I was out with 2 friends, each who have their own child, and they were like, look, I love my kid. And my friends are very real. But they're like, I love my kid and I grieve the loss of my former life. So can we talk? Because I think just naming that and telling people it's okay. You can have both and.
Yes, it is both and. Okay, my next tattoo is going to be both and. It might be on my forehead. That's how important it is. Oh, man, it is. That is the thing. Okay, so here's the thing. Most of us did not create our lives by accident, right? We have these lives. We have friends that we love. We have a job that maybe we love, maybe we don't, but we chose it. It's ours. We have an apartment or a house or a car or a cat or a dog.
Yay, I have a dog.
We have plants. We have, we have a life that we're used to living. And then this thing happens. And either it's planned and hoped for and wished for, or it's an accident, or, however this child is coming into your life. We plan this whole way through for the pregnancy. Like when you're in the pregnancy, there's, 1,000,001 books about your pregnancy and apps and websites and support groups and all of this stuff about your pregnancy. And there's 1,000,001 books about parenting. So many books about parenting. We don't need any more books about parenting. I swear. There are some books about birth and there are some courses about birth, but not enough and not all telling you the truth. What we don't have anything, that's not true. There are a couple. We have a very few books and people who are talking about the transition, what I call the 3rd trimester, those first 3 months of you coming home with your child and how they can set up really everything else. And how a really important part of them is processing, having time to really sit and think about your experience of pregnancy, your experience of childbirth, and how your life is going to be different now. Having time to process your birth out loud, to really to tell somebody the whole story of your birth, every moment that you can remember, and feel whatever feelings you need to feel about it. If you always wanted to have an all-natural childbirth and then you ended up having an epidural and you feel guilty and horrible, somebody needs to sit and listen and let you get that out, right? These are the first steps towards making this transition. You can't just, it's not a light switch that you can just, boom, I'm a mom now, right? And then as you move through it and as you get through this newborn stage and you start to move into just like having this baby, having time to really sit and think about how different your life is and have conversations with somebody about like, you know what? I miss just like getting to have sex whenever I wanted to because I wanted to. I miss getting to eat whenever I wanted to because I wanted to. I miss having control over my life because you're ceding a big part. You're letting go of a lot of control. I miss having less responsibility. I miss R-rated movies. I miss still being awake and alert at 10 o'clock at night. Like having somebody that you can have these conversations with without them being like, ooh, or without having to, and I'm sure you've heard this, it's like, this is what we have to say before we can tell the truth about motherhood. We have to say, I love my children more than anything and I would never give them up, but you know what? I don't need that.
I know you love your kid.
I assume you love your kid and you can bitch about them and still love them at the same time. Like, I don't say that anymore. I do not preface any of my stuff anymore. I'm just like, he's being a jerk today.
Yeah.
Because he is. Like, yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking about that, like, and I love that kids. It comes back to that. And you've said in another interview you're working on, like, the binary, right? Like, and perfectionism puts us in this. Yeah. I think of perfectionism in my work as like a safety, because you said it is life or death. I think of it as like a safety lens on the world. Like, I want to be safe. Not only do I want my children to be safe physically, right, but I want to make sure I'm presenting the identity of moms that I feel good about, right? I'm glad you talk about this. You have to like process this or whatever, because you're basically in a completely new phase of your life. And then if you haven't worked on that perfectionism, you talk about like in your work, it's like, then you have to like breast versus bottle, co-sleep versus CIO, homeschool versus public, schedule versus free range. And so then if you don't get out of that matrix and start to think about yourself as a person, independent of your child, you won't necessarily have your intuitive compass activated. Right. And so then you get stuck in all of this, like, what's right or wrong?
Either or, right or wrong, life or death. And here's the thing, it's not actually life or death. Don't tell anybody I said that.
Yeah. Kids are more resilient.
Okay, so the things that are actually life or death, there's a really small number of things that are life or death. Car seats are literally life or death. You have to know how to put your car seat in correctly. That is a huge risk that you're taking with your child. Vaccines are life or death. I'm not going to play around and like try and make people happy with me. They are literally life or death. You have to make sure that your child is protected. I'm trying to think of other things. I'm still trying to think of other things, right? So it is not life or death if you breastfeed or bottle feed or both. So this is where we go back to both and, because what you don't hear is that the vast majority of mothers do both and everybody's still alive. Like, yeah, we're all still here, you know, it's not. But life or death if you co-sleep or cry it out, or both. What if you start co-sleeping and then you're like, this sucks, I don't want to do this. And then you switch. Is your child going to die? No. Is your child going to end up in therapy? Probably not. And if they end up in therapy just because you did cry it out, then they've had an amazing life. And that's the only thing they're in therapy for. You did a good job.
Yeah, I can see though, like, because I know our listeners and I know I can hear them saying, well, ideally though, like, breastfeeding is better, right? Like, and this is what's going to go in their head. Like, I'm just being honest here. And I don't, I mean, you know
what? Fed is better. You know what? A baby that's not crying from hunger is better. And for a mom who is sitting there, who is having latch issues, for a mom who, like I did, I had Demer, which is a dysphoric reaction to your milk coming down. So the baby starts sucking for, you know, usually it's a few seconds, and that sets off a chain reaction of hormones that tell your boobs like, hey, release the milk. So for me, when those hormones said, release the milk, they also said, you want to die. And I had suicidal thoughts the whole time I was feeding my son.
Wow.
I would be sitting there and holding him and seeing in my head, like, all of these ways that I could die. And they all felt really comforting. They did not feel terrifying, which was terrifying. And as soon as he stopped eating, they would fade. It's almost like it is actually somebody giving you a drug and you start to feel the effects, and then you're feeling the effects for a while and then it fades, the same way that like Tylenol fades or alcohol fades or whatever. It felt very much like that every time I fed him. And when you're feeding a newborn, that can be every hour to 2 hours. So how is breast milk best for him in that situation?
Well, and that's that's what I was going to say, is that because when we're working in Truths with Food, or Why Am I Eating This Now, my work, we're ultimately breaking down the binary thinking of good and bad foods, good and bad health choices.
Yes.
And we're learning nuance. And so that's what I was going to say is, I think we forget that every choice we make is a data point, not an end point. This is one of the tools we talk about in.
Now I want to hug you.
But we aren't taught to think in systems and in context in a perfectionist mindset rather than
God, no. Yeah.
So that was my point, is that like, even if you're thinking, well, okay, so, and you just gave a stellar example of like when breastfeeding isn't best, because if we're looking at the health of the mom in relation and not just the baby, and it's more complex. It takes more experimenting. It takes more self-trust. But to your point, there aren't so many things like your baby life. It is life or death if they're fed or not.
Yes, right. That's the part that's fed. That's the part that's important, right? Is them being fed. And if you are breastfeeding at night and bottle feeding during the day, cool. If you are pumping and feeding, because I did not have that reaction when I was pumping. For some reason, I was able to pump. And get him breast milk, and I did not have the same reaction. And with my daughter, we had no problem breastfeeding. I didn't have a Demer reaction. Everything was amazing, but she had milk soy protein intolerance. And I have a deep personal relationship with Ben and Jerry. So it was a problem. It was a little bit, I made it 6 months and I was really proud of myself. But as we went along, there were less and less foods that I could eat. So I had to cut out everything with soy. I had to cut out everything with dairy. And it got to a point where she was sensitive to even the tiniest amounts of anything. And when you're looking at just most foods in the grocery store, if it is not like raw whole food, it probably has soy. If it's processed in any way at all, there's some soy in there somewhere. And she got super, super sensitive to it. And I had another kid and I could not go on a raw whole foods diet. We did not have the money for a chef to go prepare our food. And there was I couldn't handle it. And there was so much guilt around that. So much guilt. And then she had to go on she basically had to have a prescription for her formula, which was a ridiculous amount of money.
What I'm thinking too is, as we blame the mother, rather than looking at why is our food supply so fucked up? Why is there soy in everything? Why is there pesticide? And again,
why is there no simple, easy solution for that? Why is there nothing that I could buy or order? I mean, there's only so many times that you can eat a salad with chicken and or steak on it, with no dressings, with no nothing. And I was 3 meals a day. And when you're breastfeeding, you need to eat a lot. Like you need more calories because you're making those calories. And I was just like, I could not eat the same meal one more.
Right. But again, it's honoring the dynamic of the family and the context that you're, put in it. And I just feel like if we really valued mothers and families, we would start by saying what makes them healthiest. Because that would also then, what I've learned, if anything, after this election is when you design for the most marginalized.
Yeah.
Like an example, I was talking to someone, like if you put a wheelchair ramp in a restaurant, then the mom can use the stroller. And the person who has like a leg brace can, when you design for quote unquote the margins, which families are the majority, it's actually on the margin if you choose not to have children at this point. Although, to me, is it any wonder the fertility rate is so low?
I was going to say that's changing. That's changing. But I've said the same thing. I have said to people, because I do a lot of advocacy work around maternal mental health and maternal mental illness, and people have said like, well, how will we know? And what I always say is that when an Indigenous trans man can have a baby and have a completely supported and blissful pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period, then we're done. Then we can stop. That's when we hang up our boots and we're like, cool, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. That's like the goal because, then you get
at that point, everybody else will be amazing. Are you kidding? At that point, everybody else, for us to get there, all of the work that we have to do, when you think about moving the people on the margins into the center, the most vulnerable people. Yes.
And you get like more creative solutions. That's what I'm realizing. I mean, this is going to talk about political. Like one of the things that I've been so angry about is how much mediocrity from white dudes we've had to like, I'm like, oh my God, like what we've been missing out on because we let, and not all white dudes, I mean, I'm Come on, guys. My dad's a white dude. He's amazing. We know this is not black and white
Yeah,
thinking.
but he didn't have to be amazing.
Yeah. Well, my dad, I mean, he pulled himself out of poverty. His dad, I mean, my dad, and he's made such an impact on so many kids' lives. So I think he actually, because then you bring in class, right? My dad was born, I mean, he was on public assistance and all that kind of stuff. The point is that we just miss out on these really wonderful solutions.
We really do.
So how do people, so I want to talk about kind of your women's Bill of Rights and the Mother's Bill of Rights. And I want to go over them and then get some ideas of how, because a lot of my clients, their kids are young or they're in that like under 10 phase. Yep. And after our work together, like they're really ready to define motherhood on their own terms because we get out of the binary. I mean, it's still a work in progress. I don't want to say it's like, but when you get out of the binary of good and bad foods, you get out of the binary of good and bad choices in general, because it's a completely different mindset. It's not just around food anymore.
Both and will change your life.
Yes. Really so you wrote, do you mind if I want to say,
go for it.
Okay. So this is one of the things that Graeme wrote. And then we're going to go into kind of some ideas to move beyond this. We treat mothers in this country like they are inhuman and we expect them to be superhuman. That's fucking brilliant, by the way. Taking away their humanity at the same time and then superhuman. Okay, so she wrote that. Mothers put their children above all. Mothers give and never take. Mothers do not need privacy. Mothers do not have dreams until after their children have reached theirs. Mothers do not have lives until after their children have left their house. Mothers don't need support because this is what they signed up for. Mothers suffer gladly and willingly to give everything they have to their family. Mothers don't sleep unless their children are sleeping. Mothers don't eat unless their children are eating. Mothers don't exist except in relation to their children. No more. I love that. You are not a chauffeur. You are not a chef. You are not a maid, a teacher, or a therapist, or a nurse, or a personal assistant. You did not give up your personhood when you became a parent. You're a human being and have rights. It's time to reclaim them. Yes, that mother is the creation of America's particular brand of patriarchal capitalism. She is young, but not too young. She is upper middle class. She is straight. She is white. She is thin. She is blonde.
Yep. I mean, right now she might have like pink tips because the mermaid thing is in.
Right. Because she has to have the money and time to get the pink tips, right?
Yes. And she has to be fashionable, but not too fashionable, because if she's too fashionable, then she won't be respected as a mother.
Well, it's so funny you say that too.
Oh God.
Well, and on that same vein, I mean, I never want to give the Trumps any more publicity, but me and a couple of my entrepreneurial friends were talking about Ivanka Trump and her brand of, she is what the right wing idealizes in terms of beauty and all this stuff. And she's quote unquote, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but not really.
How?
No, I know. But if you're buying into that narrative.
I mean, if you have Gucci bootstraps, cool.
Yeah.
That's
but
awesome for you.
Right. But what she said at this one speech was, I may be, a successful entrepreneur, but motherhood is my highest job, something along those lines. And that still makes the patriarchy feel safe. Because then they still have the power. And we were like going to town and deconstructing like that, the symbolism in that. But I think that's kind of, okay, so that was a whole side tangent. But so then you have this Mother's Bill of Rights and the 10 Bills of Rights. And again, we'll link to Graeme's website and wonderful writing on the show notes. And she'll tell you how you can find more about her at the end. But Motherhood's Bill of Rights: personhood, privacy, space, care, voice, respect, name, dream, desires, visibility. And I think all our listeners will be like, hell yeah. And then how?
How? Right. So that's the thing. That's what happens. Like, as soon as I'm like, these things are intrinsic. You were born with them and you don't ever have to lose them. And people are like, yes, wait. Oh my God. That's why I have a job. That's why I write this stuff, is to like start to get into the how. And the first thing is that I feel like we get free together.
I just got like, even as not a mom, maybe as a dog mom and someone who mothers my clients, I was like, yes, we can do it. It just feels like strength together.
You need communities of support. And this is where mothers, people who want to be mothers, people who've chosen not to be mothers, people who the universe is not allowed to be mothers, all can come together, because when we say that, like, cliche of it takes a village to raise a child, the kid is not the person who needs the village. It is the mother that needs the village.
Ooh, wonderful reframe. Damn.
Yeah. The kid doesn't care. Seriously, I have kids. They're not interested in aunts and uncles and all that crap. Like, they're really little. I'm the one that needs that. I'm the one that needs somebody that I can call and talk to about whatever. I'm the one that needs, I am so deeply grateful for my friends who don't have children, because I can call them and just talk to them about movies and how horrible a certain actress looked on a red carpet. I can just call them and talk to them about politics. I can call them and talk to them about stuff that isn't the fact that my daughter handed me her poop. Like, I need, and she did. She literally did. And I did not kick her out of my house, Mother of the Year.
Wait, I'm just curious. Was she like, Mom, look at my poop?
Okay, so she's two. She's 2 and she hands me things. She's in this phase of, like, she hands me everything. So she'll be playing with something, and when she's done with it, she hands it to me instead of just putting it down like a normal person. Because she's 2 and they're not normal people. I'm used to her handing me things and I don't even look at them. I take them, I move them, and I keep working at whatever I'm working at. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I'm typing, I think it was a blog post or something. Mama, here. Oh, okay, whatever. I, again, still typing with my left hand, reach down with my right. She puts this thing in it and I'm like, that is warm and oh my God. And I knew what it was before I looked down, and I was like, don't look. It's not real until you look. I don't know why. So I ran to the bathroom and I put it in the toilet, and then I looked down and I was like, we're potty training, in case you couldn't tell. It's a good time.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing.
Super good. Super fun, glamorous. It's one of my birth control stories. There's some of my friends who don't have children, and these are the stories I tell them, and I call them birth control stories. Like, I'm helping you remember why you don't have kids. But I'm really grateful for them. They are a deep part of my village. You know, they have come through for me, because a lot of times when moms try to lean on other moms, the other person is just as exhausted as you are. You need someone who's not as exhausted as you are. You need somebody who maybe is hungover from going out the night before because they still have a life. Like, that's what I need. You know, the men around me have been a really important part of my village, because it's just a totally different energy. And they tend to not have the perfectionist crap that I have around the kids. So I can throw my kids at their uncle and they're just going to go get ice cream and end up with it totally covered in ice cream. But I have an hour and a half of my life back. You know, we need this support network, and it starts with us being honest. This is where I think the grieving process comes in. We have to recognize what we've lost and what we're missing and what we're craving, so that we know what to ask for.
And would you say that's it? Like, even if you're a parent who your kids are like 8 and 10, like, you might still need to go.
God, this is most of the women. It's so funny because people think that most of the people I work with are like brand new parents, and that's not usually it. Most of the mothers that I work with, their kids are between 4 and 10. That's the breaking point. Somewhere in there is like, I can't do this for 10 more years. It's the realization. Or I have been doing this for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and this is not working. And that, like, those are the twin realizations of people who usually start coming to me and being like, wait a minute, this is crap.
And I just want to emphasize that for listeners, like, you are not a bad mom at that point. You are actually getting healthy. When you're like, I can't keep doing this. That's like when people come to me, they're like, I cannot keep fighting food. And they're like, they feel so exhausted. I'm like, woo, you're open to something.
Right.
Yeah. Like, woo. But I just want to emphasize that, because moms are shamed so much. I think.
God, yes. Yeah.
They don't even allow themselves to get to that point. It's like this, or they do, some do, but it's more just this like, oh, I should be having more fun with this. Or
yes.
I was talking with a client yesterday, and she has this massive job. She got the kids lunch in the morning, took them to school, picked them up. Her husband was away that night. She still had work to do at night. And she was like, she stopped at McDonald's, got the kids McDonald's, and then she set up like a tent and like her entire like playground for them to like camp out and eat their food. And she was like, I did that so I could buy myself 30 minutes. And then they needed ketchup and they needed salt. And she's like, I just needed some quiet. And I was like, that is so healthy.
Right. How much work did she do to set that up? And then they still needed more stuff.
Yeah. And I was like, that's so healthy that you need that. And it's not wrong that you need that. Yeah. Like you're coming back to life that you realize because your life is intense.
Yes. It's not wrong at all to say to them, hey, look, you don't get this thing right now. Mommy needs 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. They're not going to die from lack of ketchup, you guys. Our job is not to make them as happy as we possibly can every moment of every day. Everybody sit with that for a second because it's really important.
So here's the nuance. So she told her daughter to wait, and then her daughter tried to get up on the stool to get it, and she was worried about her falling over. So what, like, I agree. Like, let's take that in. It's not about just their happiness.
No, it's about their health. It's about us raising the best human beings that we can. And the only way for us to do that is to heal ourselves. Because I'm not going to lie, no matter what has changed and what strides we make, the mother is still the center of the family right now. The mothers who are listening to us right now, the people who are listening to us right now who are considering motherhood in the next 5-10 years, the mother is the center of the family, right? And if the center is going to hold, then the center has to be healed. So whatever it is that you need to do to focus on your healing, and if you can do it when your kids are as young as possible. I'm not saying if your kids are 10, 12, 14, 16, don't do it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're thinking about this and your child is 2 or 3 and you're like, well, maybe it'll get better on its own magically. It will not. If you're thinking that maybe I just need to work a little bit harder, and if I had a little bit more money and if we had a little bit more time, and then I will focus on myself when they're in 1st grade. No, you won't. Do it right now. Do it right now. I always make sure that in all of the work that I do, that there's free options, that there are 5-minute options, that there are always choices that you can make and things that you can do that will center yourself in your experience of motherhood right now. We can't wait.
Well, and I love that your point. I mean, I think this is a really powerful reframe of like, what's important is the health of your child, and it is dependent on you, but on the day-to-day, as you're practicing and really getting that, like really embodying that and trusting that, when you take the focus on the child's health instead of happiness, we know for health, you need resilience. You need part of why you get the chicken pox is so that your immune system learns to rise to the occasion. Right. Yeah. Part of why kids get so many colds and everything when they're younger, they're purposely mucus factories so that their immune system is getting primed.
And learn how to do this.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I promise you that if your children had that perfect mother that you have created in your head to terrorize yourself, and also stop doing that, but if they had her, she would damage them. They would never learn what failure looked like. They would never learn what pain looked like. They would never learn what to do when they're sad or when they screw up, because if they never see us screw up, as much as we want to say that like our kids, that what we say to our kids is important, and it is-ish. If your kids listen to you, that's awesome. Mine don't. What we do is what's important. That's what's important. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned from my depression and my anxiety was that being honest with them and letting them see me break is not the end of the world. My son is 5. He knows sometimes mommy cries. Sometimes mommy gets really upset and mommy just cries, and it's not his fault. He knows that he's not in danger. He knows that tears are not scary. He knows that when mommy gets really angry and just needs to breathe and count, because sometimes postpartum rage is real, y'all. He also knows that that's not scary. He's not scared of anger. He's not scared of sadness. He's not terrified by my panic. There are times when I would have panic attacks and I would just kind of freeze for a moment. And in my head, I'm doing all of the things that I have been taught to do, all of my coping mechanisms and stuff. And as I would come back down, obviously my first thought is guilt and shame that he has seen me as anything less than perfect and in control. But what I realized was, as the more I normalized it for him, the more I was like, mommy is fine. You're fine. We're good. Let's go get some water and sit and breathe for a second. He's not scared by any of those things. He knows how to handle, in an age appropriate way, he knows how to handle all of those things. What's better than that? Like, his sister was crawling all over him, and this kid came out with, you are not expecting my brownies, which doesn't make sense, except what he meant was, you are not respecting my boundaries.
Oh,
like I said, he's 5 now, but he was 4 at the time. Like, and he was so serious. Like, he was pointing and everything. And she wasn't. She's crawling all over him. He's telling her to stop, get off. I don't want to play right now. She keeps crawling. He understood what boundaries were and what respect looks like. And none of that is because I was perfect. All of that is because I have screwed up and had to apologize to him and say, you know what? I wasn't respecting your boundaries when I kept tickling you when you said no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I did that. That's where it came from. It didn't come from this perfection myth. It came from screwing up.
Well, and when you were talking earlier, and I guess this is a great point to bring up, and then we will definitely be wrapping up. This has been so great, is I often think that because we've been raised in this perfection safety mindset, and again, a lot of my clients, I would say 80% know that they're perfectionists, and then like 20%, the other 20% realize it 2 weeks into the work. Oh, I didn't think I was, but I really am.
But how good are they at being perfectionists? Because that's really the question. Are they perfect at being perfectionists?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, that's a good question. But I think what's happened in our drive to be perfect and to be overachievers, because we haven't learned to be with our own disappointment, our own anger, our own fears, we're then, when our children experience it, I've seen this with my dog. I'm not comparing dogs to children, but when we first got him, I got so nervous about, why is he walking funny now? Why is he looking at me? And I was like, it's because I'm a fucking hypochondriac. I forget that my dog Coffee does not talk, because I talk to him so much. And I said, Carlos, this is the cheapest therapy I've ever had. Everything I know that I'm worried about, I'm assuming he's doing, right? Like, he's upset about or in distress. And it's like, it's gotten better now that we have him. And I see that all of this is a data point, not an end point, that he's not going to die. But I do think when we start to get comfortable with our own range of emotions, we're not so worried about our children and the people that we care about experiencing that as either, because we know that it's not the end. It's just a point in time.
Our healing is imperative. We have to. It's the only way for our families to thrive. And it's the only way to beat. So the other side of this perfectionism crap is the deep wells of insecurity that we all have. That's where some of the mom anger comes from, is that, I struggled so hard to breastfeed, even though X, Y, and Z. And then you see a mom bottle feeding and she seems perfectly fine. And this rage just overtakes you. You did the right thing. You worked so hard. She has to be wrong, because if she's not wrong, then what did you do all of those things for? And that's binary. That's what that is. That is binary crap. If you're in a both and world, it's that you struggled to do what you felt was right for your child. And this mother is doing what she feels is right for her child. And you're both right at the same time. That is a totally different, that releases so much stress and anxiety and pain. And that gives us this basis for connection and healing. And I mean, yes, that is what we need. That is how we move forward.
Right. Well, and I would say it's not even that both of you are right. It's just, it is what it is.
There is no right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that's part of what, and this is, we did a whole episode on fertility, and we were talking about natural ways to boost your fertility. And I said to the listeners, and I want to say this again, you can do everything to the best of your ability. And your child might still have issues and challenges. And it's not about you. Like, there is a mystery to life. And part of perfectionism is wanting to plan for everything and having the answers. And I think part of how we get out of that is like, you can do everything right and quote unquote right, or you can do the things to the best. And sometimes things still don't just go your way, go the way that we would prefer. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation of general, but I also want to point that out because I think, I think of a couple clients I know who are struggling with their children and they're trying their best. And part of having this separation of you as a person and you as a parent is recognizing that your child is their own person too.
And it calms down the judgment. So here's the thing, like, this is what I tell everybody kind of like at the end of our whatever, is that we don't know what's coming tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen with my kids tomorrow or the next day. I don't know what's going to happen with the world tomorrow or the next day. I have no idea what is coming down the pike, what they're going to need, what I'm going to need. So the only thing that I can do in this moment is try and keep myself as grounded and connected and full as I possibly can, so that whatever comes, I am working from a basis of health. I'm working from a basis of abundance so that I can handle whatever's coming to the best of my ability, because there's no freaking way for me to plan. Like, I do not know. I have no way of knowing, no way of planning, can't see the future. If I could, I would be a lottery winner and other things, but I can't say them on three. Yeah. But so the only way to prepare for these challenges that are coming along with our children, the only way to keep our families moving forward is to be as healthy as we possibly can. And I don't know if you heard, but I just had a knock at the door. So yeah.
So it is. Yeah. So this is wonderful. So for people who really want to define motherhood on their own terms, claim it, where can they find you? And again, this will all be in the show notes too.
Yeah, it's theproblemwithmotherhood.com because there are many of them. That's where all of my stuff is on that website. My writing is on that website, my coaching, my courses, all of the millions of ways to connect with moi are all right there.
And I do want to make a note, you do have a community, right? For moms who want to rebel against this patriarchal, capitalistic idea that they're just workers.
I do, and it's my favorite place on the planet. Okay, so it's called the Mom Center, and it's actually its own social network, social coaching network. It's private. It's off of Facebook, so there's none of that scrolling. There's none of that you trying to do your own work and then your sister-in-law's notification pops up and, your rage goes through the roof. None of that. It's an app and a website. We are all moms. We are all focused on self-care. We are all focused on learning. And I am group coaching in there once a week. So you can access coaching whenever you want, or you can watch the recordings later, or you can, get as much as you need. But it is a social network in that you can make a post just like you would make a post on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else, and people can comment back to you. So it is all the community and the coaching all in one place. Kind of amazing.
That's so important. That's the village. So thank you so much for being here. I had so many light bulb moments. I love your metaphors. I'm a metaphor. What's the symbolism here? So I love that.
I'm Southern. That's how we live. Metaphors are oxygen for us.
Thank you so much for being here, Graeme.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.